It's Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another episode of VETchat, the UK's #1 veterinary podcast. And I'm super pleased to have an old friend of mine, Paul Dunn, on the line. Paul is the co-founder of B1G1. I've known Paul for well over 10 years now. He's an inspirational figure in the work that he's done with B1G1. Paul, thrilled to have you on the podcast. And I'm sure your weather in sunny Queensland is rather better than ours, although the sun is shining in Liverpool.
That's good. Well, as you know, normally I'm in Singapore, where the weather forecast is recorded. It basically goes like this: it'll be 32 degrees with a chance of a thunderstorm. And the funny thing is, they're right every day about that. So now I'm in what's called the Gold Coast and in Queensland, and it's very cold. It should be summer, but it was very cold today. But I feel very warm. That's the segue, Anthony, to be chatting with you and with the people. And this is a very important word, the people who, quote unquote, belong to Webinar Vet. And we'll talk more about that sense of belonging in just a moment, because as you know, it's, as you said, 10 or 15 years ago when we first met, and everything you've done has just been so inspiring. So it's my absolute privilege to be with you.
Oh, well, thank you, Paul. And I have to also wish you a happy unbirthday today, because it isn't your birthday, but you are 29,188 days old. And really interested what you were telling me before about celebrating each day and having gratitude for each day. It completely changes people's mindset if you celebrate the little
Certainly
pleasures of
does.
life.
Surely does. And it's all about the tiny little things, and essentially one of the things that, and it's important that I don't make this all about B1G1, but one of the things that, B1G1 makes it so easy for people to do is to be able to express that gratitude to their team members in a really interesting way. And of course, to their clients in a very interesting way. And interestingly enough, I'm using the word interestingly a lot, aren't I? To people that they never even get to meet. So, yes, right now we are at 335, I think 36 actually, 336 million impacts that have been, as in positive impacts, that have been created in the world to create a better future for us. Um, and how could you not get up every day to be excited about that? And when I first met you, you remember, it was just this tiny idea, and you may remember meeting Masami and my co-founder. And I remember very well when we, Anthony, we all have, don't we? We all have moments, right? Moments in our life where we kind of get something, right? And this was a moment for me where I was mentoring her. She had a tiny little food business, and she came into this mentoring room, and she obviously had been somewhere. Obviously, and I don't mean she'd been on the town. I mean she'd been somewhere in her head. And she said, "Can we change the way we mentor today?" And I said, "Sure. What do you have in mind?" And she said, "Well, normally you ask the questions. So can I ask the questions today?" I said, "Sure, go." She said, "Well, I want you to imagine, or what if we could," she said, "what if we could create a world where every time business was done, something great happened in the world. Every time we were on Zoom, every time we had an appointment, every time whatever, right? Every time someone did something great, that something great happened in the world." And I was at that time, Anthony, you may remember, I was living in Australia, and so people would have called me an Aussie bloke, I think. And when she said that, I said, "Oh, wow, that'd be awesome." Just like a sort of Aussie vet might say it. Hello, Aussie vets. I hope you're enjoying me talking about you. Um, and she said, "Oh, well, yeah, but I don't think you get it." And I said, "Well, help me get it." And she said, "Well, in my mind, I've called it buy one, give one," which lasted, by the way, for about 24 hours. Buy one, give one. And I said, "Well, how would that work?" She said, "Well, imagine you go down to an electronics store and you buy a big TV or something. And I said, well, Masami, if I go down there to buy it, they're not going to give me another TV. I mean, that's like a crazy business model. And she said, no, you misunderstand. And this was the moment. She said, so you're getting that TV on account of how you want bigger pixels, brighter pixels, all of that kind of stuff. So she said, how would it be if when that happened, then this was the moment, how would it be when that happened, someone who could not see got the gift of sight?
Mm.
And I went, oh my God.
Mm.
And then I'm surrounded by books, as you are typically when you're mentoring. And she said, oh, imagine, author sells a book and imagine a tree getting planted. Or imagine, I had a cup of coffee with me at the time. And she said, imagine every time someone gets a cup of coffee, a child in need of water gets life-saving water. And I went, oh my God, can I be your mentor for the rest of your life?
Mm.
And that was the game changing moment for me. And I hope, by the way, in terms of game changing, that some of the ideas that we'll talk about tonight will have that same kind of sort of
Mm.
impact on the people that are listening to us. And by the way, let me just say, wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for listening to us. I feel very privileged to be with Anthony, and of course, very thrilled that you're tuning in as well.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. That's such a beautiful story, and I'm a great believer, Paul, in R&D.
Yeah,
R&D to a lot of people means research and development, but to me it means rip off and duplicate because, of course, that beautiful idea which you had and Misumi had. Uh, we've also done something similar in that every time somebody buys a
yeah,
membership at Webinar Vet, we plant 2 trees, and
yeah,
that's my passion, and I'm sure we'll spend a bit of time talking about the UN sustainability goals. We are in
yeah.
a tricky position within the world, and yet I have a great faith and a great hope that we can turn the ship around in all these sort of areas, and progress has been made, and obviously COVID, I think, stymied things, but your 336 million impacts, that's amazing, but actually just making one impact makes a difference, and then two impacts make a difference. So sometimes people go, I don't know how to start this journey to be more sustainable, to be more giving, because how do I start this journey? And of course, the old Chinese proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles, starts with
That's
the
good.
first step, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and it's really interesting you mentioned that. The interesting thing is, I think that at some level we all get it. We all get it. The problem is the how to has never been clear.
Yeah.
And I think that and all of the members around the world at B1G1, I think that what they're doing is they're putting it at the very core, whether it's a Zoom meeting, whether it's a meeting, or whether it's, it doesn't matter what it is. So, for example, if you and I were meeting on Zoom right now, 5 kids would be getting access to life changing education. And what's really interesting now is that because of some very interesting developments, the your customers, that is to say, in the vet practice, the veterinarian practice, your customers or clients, whatever it is you call them. I, by the way, would prefer you to refer to them as members. We may talk about that in just a moment,
Mm.
but that they can actually choose. So when that happens, you get this really really important sense of connection. And I think, Anthony, that I was talking to someone the other day, and I was writing a little playbook for something, and they said, "You know what, Paul? What this is actually all about is winning every day." And I thought, wow, that's a very interesting way of saying it, winning every day. And then I started to think about what is it that we need to do to win every day. And one of the most important thing I realized is it's kind of hard to do that on your own, right?
Mm.
We
Yeah.
need to connect, right, with others, other people on the team, other people in our
Mm.
family. We need to connect. And I like what Brene Brown said, all those years ago in her first TED talk. I know Brene, by the way, and she is just a hoot. She really is.
Mm.
And she said, connection. She was really blunt. She said, "Connection is why we're here. Right? It's what gives
Yeah.
meaning and purpose to our lives." And so that's one of the reasons why I think, when you and I were talking a little while ago, we talked about this whole thing around values as opposed to value. Now, value is crucially important, crucially important. Always has been, always will. But now, as we're seeing all these different things unfolding that we never thought would unfold, I mean, come on, So now we're seeing it's not so much about value, it's about values. And
Mm.
values are increasingly, how do you measure that, right? I think you measure that by what you stand for. So, one of the things that I love talking about with business owners is that what happens when you make these shifts. And so, some of the shifts, for example, are me to we, right? You really get it, me to, you've got to shift over
Mm.
there. It's not inputs, it's outcomes. It's not value, it's values. And importantly, it's not transactions. It's
Mm.
belonging. It's belonging. And so what we need to do is to find ways to monetize that relationship, if you will, right? And when that happens, amazing things open up. They really, really do. So I think that connecting, and there are a whole lot of other C words, obviously,
Mm.
that follow off the back of that. But I also think it's not just connecting. I think it's connecting collectively, if that makes sense, right? And of
Yeah.
course, that's one of the great things about Webinar Vet, that you've
Well,
got this movement, this it's
yeah,
like
it's created community, and I think
yes, exactly,
it's always really lovely to be on LinkedIn or to get an email from somebody who just says thank you for what you're doing, because
yeah,
by digitalizing, you've digitalized your business, our business has been digitalized. And I was talking about every business had to be a digital business 10 years ago,
you
and
were,
people
you were,
listened a little bit about that, but actually the pandemic encouraged everybody to transition very quickly, because if you
yeah,
didn't
no
digitally
choice.
transform, you were in the house on your own. Whereas because we've had the digital network, we were able to stay together within the pandemic, which I think was really powerful. And actually, during that time, a lot of physical conferences couldn't be held. We actually were involved in taking conferences where they would have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and being able to take them online for them and create
Yeah,
festivals, which was a
that was
festival
great.
of learning for the profession, which was such a privilege to be able to do for the World Veterinary Association in Auckland, the World Congress of Vet Derm, which was going to happen in Sydney. Unfortunately, we didn't get to Sydney, but we were able to enjoy the conference as a sort of 6 month festival within
And
our.
I love the way you titled it, right? I think labels are very important, right? And you could have
Yeah,
called it, what many people call it, the summit and all those sorts of things, which are
yeah,
nice names. But I love the fact that you called it the festival, because
yeah,
festival implies celebration, right?
exactly.
Yeah, which is so cool.
Yeah, and the pandemic was a terrible thing, but actually there were a lot of good things and a lot of silver linings that came out of that, weren't there?
Oh, there were. I was in London speaking at the Barbican, which isn't that a beautiful building? Oh
Yeah,
my goodness! And it was a fairly, I felt like an imposter actually. It was a very high powered group. And they get together every year, or they were getting together every year. It's called the Performance Theatre. And to, basically solve the world problem and world problems. And every time they open with this musical, sort of specially created musical thing. So here on this thing at the Barbican, there's this brilliant music. Oh my God, you're like at the center of the universe. And then this lady in the back, there were two ladies who I thought were singers. And one of them she was doing all of this choral stuff, which the guy on the Mac was kind of doing wonderful things with. And then the black lady stepped forward, and I noticed she had a music stand next to her. So she was not going to belt out a song. Turns out she was a poet. And her fourth line was just amazing. Can I share the fourth line with you?
yeah, sure.
She said, "Have you?" And she said it about this pace, by the way. She said, "Have you ever noticed when things break, they open?"
Hmm.
Isn't that beautiful? It's
That is
just
beautiful,
beautiful.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Did you know the Webinar Vets Virtual Veterinary Congress is back for 2024? Starting on the 5th of February, we have 10 hours of continuing education with speakers such as Sarah Heath, John Chissy and Samantha Taylor, and many, many more. We'd love to see you there. If you'd like to get involved again this year, or if you'd like to join us for the very first time, please click the link in the description below to find out more.
And I think giving another C word, it's so important that people step up and become change makers. That's something you've definitely been with B1G1. We met on a change makers
We did.
meeting, didn't we, with Roger Hamilton as
With
well?
Roger, yeah.
And we're one of the, we had a round table on that. And change is happening so quickly, and we can either be consumed by the change or we can actually be agents of change, can't we?
Yeah, exactly. And was it Steve Jobs who said something? Oh, I want to talk about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, I think, who said, "You are at some point." He said, "You are about to hit a if you haven't lived through a strategic inflection point, you haven't lived."
Yeah.
And in this past 3 years or so, it seemed like every day is a strategic inflection point where you can only make sense of it looking backwards, right? It's it's really, really important, and I think also that this is not a C word, but I love what is it okay if I use a non C word for a minute? This
Yeah,
is
we'll allow. I think I said digitalization before, so you can
yes,
have
you
one as
did.
well.
In 1994, Jobs said this. And by the way, it's really, really important for everyone listening to get the truth of this. So he said this. He said, "The storyteller is the most powerful person in the world." Now, you can ignore the power thing, but then the
Hmm.
next thing he said was like, whoa. He said, "The storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda for an entire generation yet to come." Isn't
Hmm.
that cool? And the
Yeah,
moment you get that, right, you get that it's not about you. It's about something bigger than you. And by the way, you might say, "Oh, well, Jobs was a great story creator, storyteller," which he was. But really, what he was a story creator. He was giving us tools, just like you're giving the vets tools, right, to
hmm.
do really interesting things, to change up the stories that their clients are living on account of how their pets aren't too well, for example, right? It just flips, and so when you get that, it really changes everything because it starts to talk about. Instead of you being a leader, you become a steward, if you like. Where you're
Yeah,
kind of yodering, for want of a better term, and creating in your firm, your vet firm, hopefully you're not creating followers. Hopefully what you're doing is you're creating leaders, so
yeah.
that you can sort of step away and have this wonderful vision about where you want to be and have a look at it from a much greater level. And the moment
Hmm.
you do that, you see things that they've always been there, right? But you've not seen them because you haven't just stepped up that mountain a little while. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great having, when I started Webinar Vet 13, 14 years ago, there really was no online space for
No.
anything. And now there are, um, people can make appointments online. They can do teleconsults online as well. All
Yes.
of these things have sort of come about because we started on the journey, and it's having that vision of making the world's most confident vets, because education brings confidence. If you walk into that consulting room and you have a good structure of how to approach a case, and you know the different conditions that it could be, you're going to feel much more happy and content in doing the job. And of course, if you have better vets, then the animals are looked after better. And of
Exactly.
course, that's why I became a vet in the first place. So the leverage of when we were educating people with 100 people in a room and that was it. And of course, we didn't even record it. So we began to forget the minute that we walked out of the lecture theatre. Whereas now with the ability to record, like the Khan Academy showed, and we've showed as
Yes.
well, that ability to be able to go back to create that sort of encyclopedia now of veterinary knowledge is
Amazing.
has been a massive help for vets in countries where the training levels aren't the same as they are in the UK or in America or Australia.
And I loved, Anthony, what you said about confidence. And I loved how you were talking about that confidence comes from education. I also loved the way you said structure. And
Mm,
the reason I loved you saying there was a structure, to how you look at a case, the reason I think that's really important is we know that when people, meaning your clients, see structure, they or hear the word, they actually think of great tall buildings and all of that kind of stuff.
mm,
And the moment they do that, the trust level goes up, right? And as I'm not going to have you as my vet if I don't trust you, right? So confidence and care and all of those sorts of
mm,
things go hand in hand, making something which your clients want to belong to and your team want them to belong to, and something that you're proud of every day, and something that you're leaving. Let me just do this one. I love articulation. I love it. I absolutely love articulation. And we talked about the 29,188 days. I'm not sure, Anthony, when it was because of that. By the way, I know you've all got your calculators out now if you haven't already.
mm.
But what's interesting is I'm not sure whether it's an age thing, but what happens is I think that's when we start thinking about the legacy. Right?
Yeah.
Now, the problem is we've already known that that was going to happen, but we don't start thinking about it, right, until it's too late almost, right? So if we think of legacy, then it's very interesting that we can alliterate with that. We can say instead of, and by the way, as Roger says, you don't get a choice as to whether you leave a legacy. You're going to leave one. The question is it
Yeah.
one of contribution or is it one of consumption? And but I think it's really interesting that you can play with that L. So instead of talking about leaving a legacy, why don't we talk about living the legacy every day? And then why don't we talk about leveraging the
Mm.
legacy every day so that the people in our team get that, the people in our community get that, and it really is game changing once you start to think about it that way.
I think it's really important what you talk about with values. We have 12 values in our own company, and it's something that we really try and live by. Some are a bit more aspirational than others. We've not, finished that journey yet. But the values creates the culture, another C word. And um, the leader or the servant is often the person who has to create that
Yeah.
or should be helping to embody that culture. Because if that culture, every company has a culture, and it can either be inflicted on the company or it can be actually created. And having a positive culture, within vet practice, there will be practices that you go to that there's a toxic environment, a toxic culture, those sort of places. One of our values is fun. If you're not having
It
fun, if
should
you're
be.
not loving what you do in your job, then you need to look at changing, in my view.
Yep. Very much, very much. In fact, very interestingly, on that, my soon-to-be son-in-law, whose name is John without an H. I worry about that missing H, but anyway,
Yeah,
he is actually working at Apple,
yeah,
and he talked about the onboarding experience and said that there was no way in the world that he was ever going to work with another company. And then he told me, he said, Paul, by the way, he said, "Do you know that you would be able to get a job at Apple?" And he knows my age. And I said, "Really? Is it because, I'm an Apple fanboy with all the stuff?" He said, "No." He said, in one of the cohorts that we just did, there was a guy 82 years old, and he's loving it as well. And then I found out here's a number that we should have a competition on, and we can tell people after they've done it, but I'll tell you now. Amazingly enough, and it is all about values, the average sales, quote unquote, salesperson, and there's no high pressure sales when you go into an Apple store. It's just that they're building the relationship and
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. That's where they spend their time. There's no sales training, it's relationship training.
Yeah.
Right? And anyway, the average person, I'll put it in US dollars for you, like my future son in law, and he's like not, up there, they sell 75,000 US dollars per day. And you go, what? That's just incredible. And then I said to John, that's just incredible. And he said, Paul, you need to understand that when people come into an Apple store, they come in to buy, right? And I started to think about that and start to think about how is it, what is it that we can do in a vet practice, for example, to get that where everybody is, got that lovely cultural diversity and so on. And if I can I read you what every Apple person has in the wallet on their phone, because it is
Yeah.
their values. And then what
Yeah.
I'll do, Anthony, if it's okay with you, I'll send that to you, and then you can, so people can download
Put
it
that
and
on the
stuff like that.
podcast. Yeah, sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, no, that's great, Paul.
It is just amazing, and very very quickly, it says this: we're here to enrich lives, to help dreamers become doers, to help passion expand human potential, to do the best work of our lives. At our best, we give more than we take from the planet to the person beside us. We become a place to belong. There's that word again. Where everyone is welcome, everyone. And then it goes on with some amazing stuff. And then the final line is, or the final stanza, if you will, is at our core, we believe our soul is our people. And let me people who recognize themselves in each other. Isn't that such a cool line? People who enable others to shine, people who work to leave this world better than they found it, people who live to enrich lives. I absolutely love that. So if you'd like me to send you a copy of it.
Yeah, send me it. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think I liked what you said before as well. I talk a lot about there are givers and takers in the world, but actually also, do you contribute or do you consume? I was at the beach this morning and I picked up a bit of plastic. I picked up a poop bag that had a poop in it, but the plastic, why people now bag the poop before they then leave it on the floor, I don't know. But that is somebody who doesn't want to give, he or she wants to take. And by just picking up those 2 or 3 things, again, not makes a huge difference. But if everybody does it, it makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I agree with you. I think there's a in our DNA is that we're all at our best when we're giving, and I don't mean giving money or anything like that, but when we're giving, when the little old lady, the proverbial little old lady, is going across the road, and we've helped that lady across the road. Guess what happens? The oxytocin flows because she smiles back at you and says, "Thank you very much," which creates the oxytocin in you. Or, here in Singapore, or there in Singapore where I normally am, right outside my condo, the bus service is just amazing. And whenever I get on a bus, I have my little card, which you say, and I always stop and I look at the driver and I say to the driver, "Thank you for stopping," which is really a stupid thing to say because they were going to stop anyway, right? But you can just see they spark it. And then when I get off the bus, I go around the front again and say, "Thank you, that was great." And I imagine, so I feel good about that, right? But I also imagine that the bus driver goes home and says to his wife or family, "You wouldn't believe what happened this morning on the 172 bus. There was this weird guy got on and said, and it gets back to what you were saying about before, this whole thing around gratitude and stuff, right?
I think it's a universal law that whenever you give, you always get more back. And you don't realize that at first, but once you start to get into the habit of it, of of being having an abundant lifestyle rather than a scarcity lifestyle,
Yeah,
that changes so much, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. You just you literally see the world in a different way. And one of the reasons that you do that, by the way, is because you know how guys, Anthony, we guys, we sometimes disconnect. You know, we sometimes go into what's called our cave. You know,
Yeah.
and we're not going to talk to anyone. And so we just disconnect. We really do. And you know, as we were saying before, we need to change that up and just talk about that connection and that whole giving because that's in our DNA, and that's what we, as Brene Brown said, that's why we're here.
Well, and the other C, communication, which is all around community as well. The fact that we can connect with other people, we learn, and hopefully we give, and we learn from people as well, don't we? So it's a two-way street, a good
Very much
communication.
a very much a two-way street. And by the way, if you go back to that little thing with Steve Jobs, right? You know, the storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda for an entire generation yet to
Mm.
come. Who's that actually? Who is that? That's your kids. It's the kids of the people that are coming into the practice, right? And guess what? They're looking at you, and
Yeah.
you have a chance, right? That's what Mr. Jobs was saying. You have a chance to change up their story, right? So that
Mm.
the chapter of their life has a better ending than many chapters do.
When you look at the news, if you follow the news, and there is an argument not to follow the news,
Yeah.
there is so much difficulty and despair.
Oh,
Um, and yet, I think we are called to be people of hope, people who can show that there is a way out of these difficult situations, like the
yeah,
situation in the Holy Land at the moment,
yeah,
in Ukraine, in Sudan.
yeah.
These situations just look so difficult, and yet, with will and with love, there are ways of turning these things around, aren't there?
There really are. And one of the things I was saying, or we were saying earlier on, is that effectively what we were saying, Anthony, is there's never been a more important time to do this, right?
Hmm.
There's never been a more important time.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And Paul, obviously, really love what you've done and what you continue to do with B1G1. Just remind us of the website because I would like people to go and look at this
Oh,
because,
yes, sure. Actually, what I'll do, I'll send you, if it's okay. Well, here's the link, right? Here's the link.
yeah,
So just go to b1g1.com.
yeah, and
That's where you go.
it's a number one and it's a number one just for people who,
Yes, people in the United Kingdom keep referring to it as Biggie, but no, it's
yeah,
B1G1, right?
B1G1, and
Yeah, and you
such
go
an
there.
amazing concept. And I think you were, the both of you were really at the start of this, but there is now so much of that happening where if people can see that there's an impact, and it's also where people are wanting to work with businesses that look like they're ethical businesses as well, don't they? That seem to care. The veterinary thing is people don't care how much you know; they want to know how much you care.
Okay, exactly.
And caring for them and caring for their pet or their farm animal or their horse. This is, I think, such a key to being a successful vet, that if people know that you care, and if you do care, and if you are able to give, then by getting it back, then compassion fatigue is a thing, I accept, but I think there is a way around it if we are building up ourselves with that gratitude and that celebration that you talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, and and you know it's not it's not easy. It's really not easy. But then again, someone once said nothing great is easy.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that gets me on it is that it's just becoming more important. It's just becoming more and more and more important that we get it. Right? It really is. Yeah.
And in the end, Paul, I think we both are trying in our own little ways to create a world that's more equal, because actually inequality stymies creativity, it stymies growth. And it's not fair that we have people in parts of the world. We have now a situation where our Prime Minister wants to stop the boats coming in, but doesn't talk at all about the environment. And of course, the environment is why the boats are coming in, because if you're in the global south, I mean, you're in Australia at the moment, the terrible fires you've had and the floods over the last couple of
Yeah, they're
years.
happening now, by the way. I heard today
Yeah.
they're happening now. Yeah.
If we can sort the environment out and make countries in the global south better places to live in because there are more trees and there's not deserts, then people want to live close to where their family is, to their connections, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many things, like, you look at what's been happening in Nepal, you look at what's been happening in Hawaii, you look at what's been happening in Morocco, you look at
Mm.
all of
Yeah.
that stuff. And that encourages us to to keep going, to find ways of supporting that. And it's how shall I say again? It's I it's not about. I hope this makes sense. Actually, it's not about me. It's not about Masami, right? It's not about any of that. It's about what happens as a result of. It's all about the outcomes that
Mm.
we're able to do, and just be, and by the way, be really grateful that we're able to do it, right? So
Yeah. We're both in a privileged position in that we can do things. And, um, I think as Zig Ziglar said, you've got to move quicker and quicker as you get older and older because you've got less
he
time
did.
left to make the changes. And there's a lot of change that still needs to happen. But when I see somebody like you, Paul, 29,188 days old, doing the amazing work that you're doing and moving quicker and quicker, then it gives me hope that I will be able to continue to work and try and make a difference in my own little way that I'm doing in the veterinary
Well,
profession.
Anthony, if ever you doubt that, just go back to where you were 14 years ago. Just
Yeah.
go back, and then have a look at now. Have a look at
Mm.
the people that you're able to influence, you're able to connect with, all of those things. You're able to give, as you were saying, give them more confidence, more clarity, all of those things. And that's that whole thing, right? About leveraging the legacy. So it's really cool.
The fact that we live in a very blessed time, but as with all times, there are challenges. But what really encourages me, Paul, is that the human character has the ability to rise to challenges and solve them.
Yeah.
And, the worries about things like the environment, I still think that this is something that we can make a difference on. And actually, it's so important then the community that you're in, because spending time with you today has been a great encouragement for me. And
Oh well,
it's
that's so
important
nice.
to put yourself with people who build you up and give you confidence rather than depress you, isn't it?
It surely is. Yes, given the choice, you'd want to do the former, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You really would. It's interesting, actually. It's actually interesting. I noticed today on the flights that were cancelled, and it was very possible for people to get annoyed. And I noticed that on every announcement, welcome on board, all of that sort of stuff they're saying, and they had this way of saying it, which I should have written down, but it was something like this: we thank you very much for your respect and care to the people sitting next to you and to us. And I thought, wow, that's that's really really cool. And I saw it in the something similar in the rental car thing. And so I think what's happening is we realize that when we create a world that's full of kindness, interesting things start to happen.
Yeah. No, it's really true. And Paul, I've loved speaking to you. It's always an inspiration to listen and to speak to you. Hopefully, we will manage to see each other soon, or
I hope
otherwise,
so.
get on another Zoom call because it's been really inspirational. Loved the idea around celebration, around connection, around community, clarity in the vision and the values, which then allows people to know what you stand for and who you are, and they can either want to get involved or not want to get involved, but the
True.
values are just so important. So thank you for reiterating that again for us. And for vets listening in and practices listening in, if you don't have values, well, everybody has values. They're either good values or bad values. And every practice has a culture. It's either a good culture or a bad culture. So do spend time thinking about that, because it's we all deserve to work in places that are fun and exciting to work in.
And I know that fun is one of your great values as well. And it's been
Yeah.
so much fun. I mean, here we are. It's 9 o'clock at night right now in Australia, where I am, and here we are having exactly that. Right, exactly having
Yeah.
fun. And so I am so grateful to you for arranging it, and of course for you listening, whether it's on the train, in the car, wherever it is. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that you were able to tune in as well.
Thank you so much, Paul. Enjoy your time in Australia before you go back to Singapore. And
I will.
thank you so much for everything that you're doing, for those 336 million impacts that you've been able to facilitate through B1G1. It's an amazing achievement. And just thank you for everything that you do for the planet and for the people and for the animals.
Yeah, Anthony. Yeah, in fact, I'm going to send you something which has. So I promised you I'd send you that credo, but I'm also going to send you something which people can click on, and they will see they are able to do something for animals just by clicking on this thing. So I'll send you the link later on today, and you can pop it on the show notes or wherever it is. But I think, and by the way, I think that when you click it, you'll go, "Oh my goodness! Do they do that now?" Yes, we do. So,
Yeah, brilliant.
that's great. Okay.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
everyone, for listening. This has been Vet Chat, and hope to see you very soon on a podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.